So then I start college, and then I started working at the library. They weren't nice. So I worked at the interlibrary loan. Like at first it was fine because, it's the library, it's quiet. You just like pull out the books. Then it started not being fine. And the librarians are so gossipy. They just talk smack right in front of you. And they were literally ranking each student worker. And I'm here like, I'm just trying to get my government aid, my work study aid. But no, they paid so little, by the way. So I never got the full amount of my government aid. And it was also really annoying because no one was putting the books in the right spot. So it would take me 5 years to find these books. The books are also pretty heavy, and then you have to ship them. So then when I met the whale was like, why are you doing all this work for like barely any pay? It doesn't really make sense for you to continue, especially when you're trying to graduate early with all these classes. So I was like, okay, you're right. So I just quit. They also offered the position over the summer, but I was like, okay, you're paying me almost nothing. It would take me 2 hours of my time to pay for my trip like to the school, that it didn't really make sense for me to work there over the summer. So over the summer, I worked at the Frog Pond, which is in the Boston Commons. So my friend Anna, we call her Cat Girl because she loves cats. I think she actually likes her nickname. So she is such a hard worker. In high school, she worked so many jobs. I was really impressed. So I was like, girl, could you hook me up with a job? So she was like, yeah, I work at like the Boston Children's Hospital. Like, why don't I get you a job at the gift shop? And I was like, oh, okay, sounds good. Went there with my resume and everything. It was very strange because he sent me an email for an interview time. So I show up, I'm ready, I have my resume, and then he doesn't interview me. And I'm like, oh, okay. Cool. And he's like, I'll call you. And then I saw the way that he was treating my friend. It wasn't really nice. And I was like, you know what, screw it. I don't want to be treated like that. So I told my friend, I don't think that's the right fit. I don't know. I heard you worked at like the Frog Pond. Can I get a job there? And then she was like, you're right. She actually quit because she agreed. The guy was straight up a dick, and he didn't turn on the AC during the summer. So she was like drenched by the end of the day. I'm not trying to be boiled alive next to the plushies. So I go to the Frog Pond. I think I had my resume and everything. I immediately get the job, and then they gave me my uniform. And it was really awkward because it was also a day when my high school counselor asked me to come back to the high school and give a talk to all these students about what college was like. So I had my uniform, like I just like put it through my belt loop because I had like, I don't know, I didn't want it to be in my hands. And then I started working at the Frog Pond. I was selling Dippin' Dots. I was also operating the carousel later on. They wanted to put me in the kitchen, but there was this other girl who was working there, and she's a single mother, and she was working there, and she was making a lot of mistakes with the cash register. So they were like, Wendy probably has some experience. And I'm like, what experience? So that was like fun because the food wasn't bad. I actually ended up working there for 2 summers, and it was fun while it lasted. And I got like a little bit nervous because I was using all of my summer money to pay for my college loans. Also, I had back pain. I reached over to pick up a water bottle cap that I dropped. I couldn't move my back. Like, I was in so much pain. I'm really frail like that. So I was like, okay, this isn't working. So then I go back to school and I become a note taker. I took notes for people who had disabilities. That's a very low-key job because I'm already taking notes. And then all I had to do is scan it at the library, which I know how to use a scanner now because I did work at the library. Yeah, and then all I had to do was email the file to them. So it wasn't bad. So it was the end of my junior year, and I didn't have anything over the summer. All my friends, they all had family connections, so they all had an internship lined up for them because their parents just asked a colleague. My parents don't have those connections, so I ended up applying like crazy. The bank that offered me an internship in high school actually came back and was like, oh, congratulations, you have a spot. During the interview, it was actually pretty nerve-wracking. I was interviewed by 2 people who had already gone through the internship experience, and they just graduated college. So during the interview, they were trying to use all these abbreviations, but it was basically saying like a portfolio manager. So they're like the PM, and they kept using those terms. And I'm like, yes, we get it. You deal with portfolios. At the end, I think I intimidated them a lot because I was like, oh yeah, so I saw on this slide that you had this much in reserves, but it doesn't really make sense because the GDP of the world, and then like it did make sense. I already knew the answer to this question. I was just like, let's see like if you guys know some econ. They totally did not know the answer and they just gave me some BS response. And then they looked so nervous, like I was interviewing them. And I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. I smiled and left. So then during orientation for this internship, the guy was like, does anyone know what the GDP of the world is? So I think I left an impression on them. I've never worked in an office this quiet. I remember this lady, she was talking about how her pills were like $1 more each month. It adds up, okay? And then once she left, the guy who was her cubicle mate started gossiping about her, and I was like, oh, this is like not the place where I want to work. Maybe they did have work for me, but the guy they paired me up with, he was just so salty about his friends getting all these promotions that he was just like so dead set on getting a promotion himself. He was being paid around like 35K a year, and I was like, oh, that's not a lot. I went through like a little bit of hazing through his friends, so I basically got fired when I like brought this to my manager because I was like, I don't think this is appropriate. And he was like, okay. But my manager was never in the building, and I finally connected with this woman. So there's like officer, then VP or assistant VP and stuff. So she was an officer. She's been there for 10 years. I got along with her. But by then, I think the team had formed an opinion about me based on this previous guy. And because the company was paying him so little, I'm pretty sure they wanted to keep him on because he was doing a fine job. Why let go of someone who's willing to be paid 35K? So yeah, I got let go. They didn't really provide me any explanation. So I'm like walking with the HR lady, and I'm like, so why am I fired? And then she was like, oh, they didn't tell you like anything? I'm like, no. So then she like gave me all the reasons, and I was telling her like, oh, well, it's because they're telling me that I have to do all these trainings, so my computer doesn't work. So yeah, I didn't get a computer for a whole month. Then the next week, I started working at a law firm as a paralegal. It was really awkward because then I found out that it was actually my friend's mom that I was working with, and then my parents actually use this lawyer sometimes. This lawyer just kept pressuring me, and he was like, why don't you apply to law school? Because I just had my senior year left. I think it was just like one semester left. I was like, oh, but I'm thinking about like living in Europe and doing all these things. And he's like, oh, you're just gonna become like a hippie in Europe. And I'm like, no, that's not what it means. But I don't know. I just like let him form his own opinions because he was strange. This was also a personal injury lawyer. So I had to fill out a form basically with name, like what kind of accident it was, and if they had any like photo evidence, I'd collect that. And then I'd also ask the hospital for some information on their appointment. And then I had to summarize it and give it to all the lawyers. There were 2 lawyers in the office, and then there were like 3 or 5 that like randomly showed up. So I would have to translate for them because I speak Chinese. So I would translate for them. Like one time I had a walk-in, she was very aggressive. She wanted money from her ex-husband. So if you are in a case of domestic violence with someone who is a citizen and you are not, you actually can get your green card that way. So she got her green card and then divorced him. But now she wants money from him just to say like, I went through some stuff, so can you give me some money for all the crap I had to go through? And then that's just like not how it works. So it was like a very hard conversation. And also there were lots of terms I haven't heard in Chinese, like domestic abuse. So she really had no patience for me. And then I was planning on working with them during the school year too. Because I'm minoring in legal studies, they would have allowed me to take on an internship. But when I spoke to the professor, she said I couldn't work with the law office because they were a for-profit. So then I had to break the news to the lawyers, and then my friend's mom was like, but I work so well with you. You know, how am I going to find someone else? And I'm like, I'm sure you will. So during my senior year of college, I was working as like a data analyst for a senator. So this was to complete my legal study minor. Oh my God, I had so much fun. The whale actually did the same internship at the Senate, but he didn't really have as much fun because your colleagues really matter, and he didn't really have the best ones. Mine was great because my manager, my supervisor and manager, she always took me to all the events I always wanted to go to, and she would explain things if I didn't understand. Some days she'll be like, oh, you definitely have to come on this this day. I know like you don't come in on this day usually, but I think it's really good for you to see. Yeah, I had a really good experience. The whale actually had graduated and he gave me his job of being a econ tutor. So I was an econ tutor for the whole semester. It was pretty chill. One girl was like super attached to me and she would like always email me. Like I'm totally fine with that. So I basically have open office hours, and what happens is if no one comes, I can basically do my own thing. During this time, someone calls me and asks,
"Hey, I see that you've been a paralegal. Are you interested in this job? Can I get a copy of your resume to send over to this company?"
He told me about the pay, but I had no idea. I'm like, anything above $15 an hour? I was like, yeah, seems good. This guy, he's like, he contacts me, he doesn't really get back to me. I graduate without a job because this guy, he just keeps telling me that I'm gonna get a job, but like, so I worked at a college bookstore. There were some people from high school who were at this college who looked at me like, I think I know you. I don't want to like ask in case it's not you. I was a cashier and I really hated it because the managers were just talking down to me all the time. One time it got so bad that the customer actually intervened and was like, you can't talk to her like that. Like, what the hell? And then she was like, yes, I can. She's my employee. Yeah, it was bad. After working there for like maybe a month or two, I was like, yeah, I'm out. I actually did get that job, and then I was working in banking. So I created legal documents. You don't need to be a paralegal for this job. And because I just graduated, I was the youngest person there in the office. Sometimes I felt like a lot of the bankers were just asking way too much, and they were like, where's this, where's this? And I would constantly email back saying, hey, I need this before I can get to this. But yeah, then you don't get a response. So that was like one thing I didn't really like about the job. They graded you based on the quality of your work and then also how many deals you can do. That was like a lot of pressure that I really didn't need. So then I moved to Chicago and then I needed another job. So I stayed with the bank, but I left after like a month because I found out the seat that I was in, the girl killed herself. There was like a whole lawsuit about it. The manager was overworking the whole team and they weren't paying for overtime. It was just insane. Then that's why I had a new manager. It just rubbed me the wrong way. And it seemed like the company didn't really have my best interests in mind. So I left. But it was also because at that time someone reached out to me and was like, hey, would you want to do this? So we all know like robots are going to take over the world one day. So I'm in this project where it is going to be a lot of banking automation. And yeah, so that's what I do now. Thanks for coming along with me through this like really long journey of all the jobs I've ever done. If you have any questions, just leave them down below. And thank you for watching. And I'll see you next time. Bye.